Motorcycling isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. Whether you're into touring, racing, off-roading, or just weekend cruises, motorcycles symbolize freedom, rebellion, and engineering brilliance. But the industry is changing. Shifting emissions regulations, evolving buyer habits, electric vehicle mandates, and rising production costs are challenging even the most iconic names in the business. Here on this channel, we dive deep into the stories that matter to riders. We break down the past, present, and possible futures of the bikes we love. We talk tech, history, and trends without the fluff. Today's topic might ruffle a few feathers. We're talking about 6 motorcycle brands, or at least key product lines, that are dangerously close to disappearing. Some have been on life support for years. Others are shockingly recent casualties. Don't worry, this isn't a doom and gloom piece. It's a look at the realities behind the headlines and what might happen next. Let's get into it. The Yamaha VMAX was a machine born for the drag strip, but struggled to find its place in a world that was evolving faster than it could rev. Its raw, unapologetic power made it a legend among muscle bike enthusiasts, but it was that very identity that eventually boxed it into a corner. Unlike sport bikes that evolved with technology and handling finesse, or cruisers that leaned into lifestyle and comfort, the VMAX stayed rooted in its original concept, an all-out power cruiser. And that, over time, became both its greatest strength and fatal flaw. When the original VMAX landed, it was revolutionary. The V-Boost system was almost sci-fi for the time, a mechanical innovation that gave the rider a literal punch of extra power at high RPMs. You didn't ride a VMAX, you held on for dear life. But by the time the 2009 model launched, the rest of the motorcycle world had caught up. Technology had moved on, and high-horsepower bikes were no longer rare. Riders wanted more than just straight-line speed. They wanted agility, connectivity, electronic aids, and all-day comfort. The VMAX? It still felt like it wanted to tear your arms off, and little else. Its weight was another Achilles' heel. At nearly 700 pounds fully fueled, it was a beast to handle in tight urban settings or twisty roads. You could demolish a quarter mile, but try carving a canyon or navigating traffic, and suddenly, that 197 horsepower didn't feel so useful. Combine that with its hefty price tag and lack of practicality, and it quickly became clear. The VMAX wasn't for everyone. It was for a very specific kind of rider. And the market for that kind of rider was shrinking. As emissions regulations tightened and consumer expectations shifted toward versatile, efficient, and tech-laden machines, the VMAX's refusal to change left it exposed. Yamaha didn't try to water it down or turn it into something it wasn't. They let it ride out its legacy. But legacy doesn't sell bikes. And when sales numbers didn't justify the production costs, the decision to pull the plug was inevitable. There were no flashy send-offs or farewell editions dripping in nostalgia. Yamaha just stopped. The silence surrounding the end of the VMAX era was almost poetic. A bike that roared louder than most went out with a whisper. In the end, the VMAX was a victim of its own legend. It didn't get banned because it was dangerous or ill. It got left behind because the world moved on, and the VMAX refused to chase it. Harley-Davidson's Livewire was supposed to be a bold leap into the future, a shot across the bow of the electric revolution. But instead of roaring into the next era, it quietly fizzled, more of a static buzz than electric thunder. The idea was ambitious. Take a brand synonymous with roaring V-twins and open roads and rewire it for the silent, instant torque world of EVs. But the execution? It came way too early for the market, and arguably too early for Harley itself. The Livewire was, by most accounts, an engineering success. Acceleration was neck-snapping, handling was sharp, and the build quality was solid. But Harley's core customer base didn't ask for this. They weren't clamoring for battery packs and regenerative braking. They were still debating carburetors versus EFI. That disconnect between brand identity and product direction alienated loyalists who felt like Harley was abandoning its roots. Meanwhile, the younger urban audience that might have been open to an electric motorcycle couldn't justify the price. At over $30,000, the original Livewire was competing not with other motorcycles but with cars, and premium ones at that. It was a luxury item dressed as a revolution, launched into a segment that hadn't even stabilized yet. There were no widespread charging networks for bikes, no real second-hand market, no clear value proposition beyond being the first. Harley tried to salvage it. In 2021, they spun off Livewire as its own brand, hoping to reframe it outside the shadow of chrome and leather. They introduced more affordable models like the S2 Del Mar, targeted toward a broader audience. But the results have been underwhelming. Electric motorcycle adoption is still slow, with most consumers citing range anxiety, infrastructure concerns, and high costs as major barriers. What makes this story even more telling is how quiet Harley has been about Livewire's performance. The aggressive marketing push has softened, and the brand's mainstream focus seems to be drifting back to its bread and butter: gas-powered cruisers with nostalgic appeal. It's not an outright cancellation, but it feels like a quiet step back from a project that just didn't click. Harley-Davidson tried to reinvent itself with Livewire. It wasn't banned or pulled because of controversy. It simply didn't land. It showed up before the market was ready, aimed at people who weren't asking for it, and priced itself into obscurity. The lesson here? Being first doesn't always mean being successful. Sometimes, it just means being too early to matter. Norton Motorcycles is one of the oldest and most storied names in motorcycling history. Once synonymous with British racing heritage and mechanical excellence, the brand had everything going for it: legacy, loyalty, and a look that never went out of style. But what happened to Norton in the modern era is nothing short of tragic. This wasn't a ban by regulators or a response to poor engineering. This was a slow-motion collapse brought on by catastrophic mismanagement, broken promises, and shattered trust. When Norton was revived in the late 2000s under Stuart Garner, hopes were high. The dream was simple: revive the legendary cafe racer spirit with handcrafted bikes built in the UK. The company unveiled gleaming models like the Commando 961 and the V4 RR Superbike, combining classic styling with cutting-edge tech. But while the bikes looked the part, everything behind the scenes was falling apart. Customers who paid deposits waited years for their motorcycles. Some never received them. There were reports of bikes being delivered with missing parts or suffering major reliability issues. And then came the real scandal. Garner had improperly used pension funds to prop up the company. Workers and retirees lost millions, and the UK government launched a criminal investigation. The damage wasn't just financial, it gutted whatever credibility Norton had clawed back. By the time Norton collapsed in 2020, it was a toxic brand. Not because of its products, but because of the leadership that exploited its legacy. Garner's reign turned what could have been one of the greatest motorcycle comebacks into a cautionary tale. The name Norton didn't die because the bikes were bad. It died because no one trusted it anymore. India's TVS Motor Company stepped in and acquired the brand, promising to clean house and start fresh. Since then, there have been promising signs. Production has resumed, new headquarters have been established, and the V4SV Superbike is slowly making its way into showrooms. But rebuilding trust in the motorcycle world is harder than building the bikes themselves. Today, Norton exists in a sort of limbo. It's alive on paper, with new bikes and a corporate structure behind it. But in the eyes of the riding community, it's still tainted. It's not banned by law, but it's effectively banned by the riders who once loved it. They've moved on. They've chosen brands they can rely on. For Norton to matter again, it's going to take more than slick marketing and shiny metal. It'll take years of consistency, transparency, and performance. And right now, that road back still looks very long. Victory Motorcycles is one of the most striking examples of how innovation alone isn't enough to survive in the motorcycle world, especially when you're up against a brand as culturally entrenched as Harley-Davidson. Polaris Industries launched Victory in 1998 with a clear goal: to build American-made cruisers and tourers that could challenge the undisputed heavyweight of the U.S. motorcycle scene. And in many ways, they succeeded, at least on paper. Victory bikes were bold, angular, and different. They didn't try to copy Harley's old-school aesthetic. Instead, they pushed forward with futuristic designs and modern engineering. Models like the Victory Vegas and Cross Country weren't just good, they were critically acclaimed. Reliable, powerful, and often ahead of their time, they proved that American bikes didn't have to be stuck in a retro time warp. Even the attempt to jump into the electric scene with the Impulse TT, based on Brahmo's tech, showed that Victory was thinking about the future when others weren't. But the market had other ideas. No matter how advanced or unique Victory's bikes were, they couldn't crack Harley's cult-like customer base. For a lot of riders, owning a Harley isn't just about the ride. It's about identity, tradition, and belonging to a community. Victory, despite building arguably better bikes in some categories, couldn't buy that kind of loyalty. The dealerships weren't as widespread. The brand didn't have decades of heritage behind it, and the alternative to Harley label never quite resonated. Then came the real turning point. In 2011, Polaris acquired Indian Motorcycles, an iconic American brand with roots that go even deeper than Harley's. Unlike Victory, Indian came with history, nostalgia, and a recognizable name. Polaris now had two motorcycle brands under one roof, but only one had the cultural weight to go toe-to-toe with Harley in a meaningful way. The writing was on the wall. By 2017, Polaris made the hard decision. Victory would be discontinued so the company could focus entirely on Indian. It wasn't about engineering, quality, or innovation. It was about brand value and market position. Victory simply couldn't compete in the long term when India offered the same potential with a much stronger legacy behind it. Victory didn't fail because it was a bad brand. It failed because even great motorcycles can't overcome deep-rooted customer loyalty and market identity. And just like that, a nearly two-decade effort vanished. Not banned, not broken, just no longer needed in a world that values the story as much as the ride. EBR, or Eric Buell Racing, was the passion project of a man who simply refused to quit. Eric Buell wasn't just building motorcycles, he was chasing a vision. A vision of American-made sport bikes that could stand toe-to-toe with the best from Europe and Japan. And for a while, it looked like he might actually pull it off. But no matter how much engineering talent or innovation went into the bikes, EBR was a company that just couldn't escape the harsh realities of the market. After Harley-Davidson shut down Buell Motorcycles in 2009, Eric Buell could have walked away. Instead, he doubled down, founding EBR to continue what he started, this time focusing purely on high-performance machines. The flagship 1190 RX was a serious contender, boasting over 180 horsepower, razor-sharp handling, and a unique identity that blended American muscle with track-ready performance. Reviewers praised it. Enthusiasts were intrigued. But here's where the dream started to unravel. EBR didn't have the resources of a major manufacturer. Development was expensive, production was limited, and the dealership network was thin. Even with a strategic partnership with India's Hero MotoCorp, which bought a 49% stake in the company, the money just wasn't enough. Hero wanted to expand its global footprint and saw EBR as a way in. But the reality of building and selling premium superbikes in the US proved too challenging. By 2015, EBR had filed for bankruptcy. They tried again, and again. Each time, there were announcements of comebacks, new models, and limited runs, but they all fell short. Liquid Asset Partners, the firm that bought EBR's remaining assets, kept the name alive for a while, producing a handful of bikes and teasing a revival. But these were more like collector's novelties than viable mass-market products. Meanwhile, Eric Buell moved on. His latest endeavor, Fuel, is focused on electric two-wheelers for urban mobility, bikes and e-bikes aimed at city riders, not track day warriors. It's a complete pivot from the adrenaline-fueled ethos of EBR, but perhaps a more sustainable path in today's shifting transportation landscape. As for EBR, it wasn't banned, but it faded into obscurity. It's a sobering example of how even the most passionate, technically gifted founders can't survive without the infrastructure, funding, and timing to match their ambition. EBR was a brilliant flame that burnt too fast and too alone. And now, it's little more than a memory for those who believed American sport bikes could rewrite the rules. MV Agusta has always carried itself like the Ferrari of motorcycles, sleek, exotic, and unapologetically elite. These machines aren't just transportation, they're performance art. From the iconic F4 designed by Massimo Tamburini to the aggressively styled Brutale and Dragster, MV Agusta motorcycles have always turned heads and stirred hearts. But if you peel back the layers of carbon fiber and billet aluminum, the story gets much darker. This is a brand that has been fighting for survival almost as long as it's been making headlines. Despite the pedigree and the passion, MV Agusta has been on the edge of collapse more times than most enthusiasts can count. Over the last 2 decades, the company has changed owners, like some bikes changed tires. Proton, Harley-Davidson, the Castiglione family, Russian investment firm Black Ocean, and now Austria's Pirer Mobility Group, which also controls KTM, Husqvarna, and GasGas. What does that mean for MV Agusta? On the surface, it might look like a lifeline. Finally, a solid parent company with resources and reach. But look closer, and the picture becomes more complex. Pirer Mobility isn't known for preserving boutique brands as they are. They focus on volume, efficiency, and platform sharing. It's highly likely that we'll see MV Agusta shift away from its handcrafted high-cost roots into something more modular. The fear isn't that MV Agusta will stop making motorcycles. The fear is that they'll stop making MV Agustas in the way we've come to know them. The danger is in dilution, badge-engineered scrutiny on KTM platforms, stripped of the Italian soul that made them special in the first place. Pirer has already begun restructuring. The lineup is shrinking. Production is being scrutinized. Costs are being cut. All of this points toward a brand being reshaped to fit into a broader corporate machine. This isn't a ban, but it might as well feel like one for longtime fans. The pure, uncompromised spirit of MV Agusta is being boxed in by business logic. The passion that once put form above function is now forced to answer to shareholders and spreadsheets. That's not inherently wrong. It might even save the company. But at what cost? The truth is, MV Agusta's greatest threat has never been competition or regulation. It's always been the fragile balance between art and commerce. And right now, that balance is teetering dangerously close to collapse. The bikes may still be beautiful, but the soul behind them is on life support. The bigger picture. It's not just about bad business decisions. The motorcycle industry as a whole is evolving, fast. Emission regulations are forcing brands to retire character-rich engines. Young riders often prefer cheaper, urban-friendly bikes or EVs. Insurance and licensing are increasingly prohibitive in many markets. Electric mobility is shifting attention from petrol to plug. Some brands can adapt. Others, particularly niche players or heritage-driven lines like the VMAX or Norton, struggle to reinvent themselves without losing their identity. So, are these 6 brands doomed? Not necessarily. But they are warning signs, reminders that even the most iconic motorcycles need to evolve or risk fading into memory. The good news? As riders and enthusiasts, we have a role to play. Passion keeps brands alive, and knowledge gives us the power to support companies that value innovation and heritage in equal measure. Now it's your turn. Which of these bikes or brands do you miss most? Do you think Yamaha will ever bring the VMAX back? Which brand should we cover next? If you enjoyed this deep dive into motorcycle history, trends, and what the future may hold, don't forget to like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more bike content every week. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, ride smart, and keep the rubber side down.